The package sat on my kitchen counter like a guilty conscience, wrapped in expensive paper that screamed boutique elegance. No return address, no card. Just another anonymous delivery that had somehow found its way to Mercer Bannister. That's me, while my wife Felicity was supposedly 3 states away closing another marketing deal. I'd been staring at this thing for 20 minutes, coffee growing cold in my favorite mug, wondering what fresh mystery had landed on my doorstep this time. The pattern had become predictable over the past 6 months. Felicity travels for work, package arrives, she returns home glowing like she'd conquered the business world single-handedly. Just some samples from vendors, she'd always say, waving off my curiosity with that practiced smile that used to make my knees weak. Now it just made me suspicious. This particular morning, with rain drumming against the windows of our Connecticut Colonial and Ms. Dorsey from next door already peeking through her curtains like some suburban surveillance system, I decided enough was enough. Time to see what kind of vendor samples required such elaborate packaging. The tape peeled away easily, too easily, like someone had been careful not to damage the box for reuse. Inside, nestled in tissue paper that probably cost more than my lunch, lay a set of lingerie that would make a Victoria's Secret model blush, black lace, silk trim, the works. The kind of intimate apparel that comes with a price tag requiring a second mortgage. But here's the thing that made my engineer's brain start clicking like a calculator on overdrive. The size was all wrong. Felicity wore a medium in everything, had since college. This was clearly a large, maybe even extra large. Either my wife had been hitting the gym in reverse, or someone else was meant to wear these particular delicacies. I set the lingerie aside and dug deeper into the box. Perfume. Expensive stuff. The kind that comes in crystal bottles with French names I couldn't pronounce. A jewelry box containing earrings that probably cost more than my monthly salary at the tech consulting firm. And at the bottom, almost like an afterthought, a small envelope. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Inside, a card with elegant script. For my darling, until we can be together always. Emma Gray, M. Gray. The mysterious benefactor who'd been showering my wife with gifts while I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for our suburban paradise. The phantom lover who apparently had better taste in presents than I'd ever managed in 15 years of marriage. I photographed everything with my phone, careful to capture serial numbers, brand labels, anything that might prove useful later. Then I repacked the box exactly as I'd found it, smoothing the tape back into place with the precision of someone who'd spent years troubleshooting complex systems. The house felt different after that. Every corner seemed to hold secrets. Every shadow might be hiding evidence of Felicity's double life. I wandered through rooms we'd decorated together, past photos of happier times, wondering how long this had been going on under my nose. My phone buzzed, text from Felicity. "Flight delayed again. Won't be home until tomorrow evening. Miss you." Miss me. Right. The way a shark misses the fish it's already swallowed. I spent the rest of the day in my home office, surrounded by computer screens and the comfortable hum of electronics, doing what I do best, solving problems through methodical analysis. If Felicity thought she could outsmart a systems engineer with a master's degree in pattern recognition, she had another think coming. First stop, shipping records. Every delivery service keeps logs, and I had enough technical knowledge to access what I needed without crossing any legal lines. The packages had been coming from Thornfield Boutique, an upscale shop downtown that catered to women with more money than sense. Next, credit card statements. Felicity and I maintained separate accounts for personal expenses, but I had access to our joint statements. No unusual charges, which meant either she was paying cash or someone else was footing the bill. That evening, I called my old college buddy Owen, who worked part-time at Thornfield Boutique between his gigs as a freelance graphic designer. Owen had always been the type to notice everything and remember details that would slip past normal people. "Mercer, how's married life treating you?" His voice carried that easy familiarity of someone who'd known me since I was young and stupid instead of just middle-aged and suspicious. "Can't complain. Listen, I need a favor. Someone's been sending gifts from your boutique, and I want to surprise them with a thank you note. Any way you could check who's been making purchases under the name M. Gray?" Owen paused. In the background, I could hear the soft jazz they always played at Thornfield, designed to make customers feel sophisticated while they emptied their wallets. "McGray? Yeah, that name sounds familiar. Let me check our system." Keyboard clicks, then a low whistle. "Wow, this guy's been busy. Monthly purchases for the past 6 months, always the same shipping address. Wait, that's your address, isn't it?" My grip tightened on the phone. "What's the payment method?" "Credit card. Name on the account is Grant Thornton. Does that ring any bells?" The world tilted sideways. Grant Thornton, Hazel's husband, my wife's best friend's husband, the guy who came to our house for Sunday dinners, who helped me fix the deck last summer, who'd been sitting at my table eating my food while sending expensive gifts to my wife. Mercer, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Owen. I owe you one. Everything okay? You sound weird. Just surprised, that's all. I'll talk to you later. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the computer screen. Grant Thornton, the successful real estate agent with his perfect smile and his handshake that lasted just a beat too long. The man who always complimented Felicity's cooking, her dress, her laugh. The man whose wife Hazel had been Felicity's best friend since high school. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes in slow motion. The timing of Felicity's business trips, Grant's mysterious client meetings that Hazel always complained about, the way they'd sit just a little too close during our dinner parties, how their conversations would stop abruptly when someone else walked into the room. I pulled up our calendar, cross-referencing Felicity's travel dates with the package deliveries. Perfect correlation. Every single time she left town, a gift arrived the next day, like clockwork, like a system designed by someone who understood patterns and timing. But here's what really got my analytical mind spinning. The sizes were wrong for Felicity, but they'd be perfect for Hazel. Grant wasn't just having an affair with my wife, he was buying gifts meant for his own wife and sending them to my address. Either he was the stupidest cheater in Connecticut, or there was something else going on here. I needed more information, I needed evidence, and most importantly, I needed a plan. The next morning, I drove to Thornfield Boutique. The place reeked of money and desperation. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers designed to make customers feel like they were shopping in a palace instead of an overpriced retail space. Owen spotted me immediately. He was arranging a display of scarves that probably cost more than most people's car payments, his artistic eye evident in the way he draped the fabric. Mercer, didn't expect to see you here in person. He glanced around, then leaned closer. About that Monsieur Gray thing, I did some more digging after we talked. Want to know something interesting? Always. The guy specifically requested that certain items be sized large, even though the customer profile indicates medium preferences. And get this, he always pays extra for discreet packaging and next-day delivery. Discreet packaging? No store logos, plain brown boxes, generic shipping labels, like he doesn't want anyone to know where the stuff came from. My mind raced through the implications. Grant was covering his tracks, but not very well. The kind of amateur hour operation you'd expect from someone who thought he was smarter than he actually was. Owen, I need another favor. Do you have security cameras in here? Of course, insurance requirement. He gestured towards several discrete cameras positioned around the store. Why? How long do you keep the footage? 6 months, maybe longer if nothing gets recorded over it. His expression grew serious. Mercer, what's really going on here? I looked at my old friend, weighing how much to reveal. Owen had never liked Grant. Something about the way he treated service workers had always rubbed Owen the wrong way. If I was going to build a case against my wife's lover, I'd need allies. Let's just say I'm conducting a personal investigation into some unusual gift-giving patterns. Think you could help me review some footage from the past few months? Owen's eyes lit up with the kind of mischievous gleam I remembered from college. Now you're talking my language. When do we start? That afternoon, we huddled in the boutique's back office, scrolling through security footage on Owen's laptop. It didn't take long to find what we were looking for. There was Grant, larger than life in high definition, selecting lingerie with the focused intensity of a man on a mission. But the really interesting part came when we watched him at the checkout counter. He wasn't nervous or furtive like you'd expect from someone conducting an affair. He was confident, almost casual, chatting with the sales clerk about sizing and preferences like he'd done this 100 times before. Look at that, Owen said, pointing at the screen. He's not acting like someone buying gifts for a mistress. He's acting like someone buying gifts for his wife. Except he's having them shipped to my house? Exactly. Which means either he's the world's stupidest cheater or what? Owen paused the video and turned to look at me. Or your wife isn't the only one involved in this little arrangement. The implications hit me like a freight train. Not just an affair between Grant and Felicity. Something bigger. Something that involved all 4 of us, whether we knew it or not. I spent the drive home thinking about Hazel. A sweet, trusting Hazel who made the best apple pie in the neighborhood and always remembered everyone's birthday. Hazel who'd been acting strange lately, more distant, less chatty during our social gatherings. Hazel who'd been losing weight and buying new clothes and getting her hair done more often. Hazel who wore a size large in everything. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. Grant wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was using his affair with my wife to buy gifts for someone else entirely. The question was whether Hazel knew about it, or if she was as much a victim in this as I was. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision. If Grant Thornton wanted to play games with anonymous gifts and fake names, I'd give him a game he'd never forget. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to know how deep this rabbit hole really went. Felicity returned home that evening with her usual post-trip glow, all smiles and stories about successful client presentations. She swept through our front door like she owned the world, designer luggage in tow, already talking about her next business adventure. "The Chicago deal is practically in the bag," she announced, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter right next to where the mysterious package had sat that morning. "Johnson Industries wants to expand their marketing campaign nationwide. This could be the biggest contract our agency has ever landed." I nodded and made appropriate interested noises while studying her face for any signs of guilt or deception. Nothing. Felicity had always been good at compartmentalizing, a skill that served her well in the cutthroat world of advertising. Apparently, it also served her well in the cutthroat world of extramarital affairs. "That's great, honey. I'm proud of you." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I delivered them with the same enthusiasm I'd been faking for months. "Did you get the package that came while you were away?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. "Package?" "Brown box, no return address. I left it on your dresser." "Oh, that. Probably just samples from a vendor. You know how it is in marketing. Everyone's always trying to get your attention with free gifts." She moved toward the stairs with studied casualness, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. 20 minutes later, she came back down wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, her hair freshly brushed and her mood suspiciously improved. "Want to order Chinese food tonight?" she asked, sliding up next to me on the couch. "We could watch that movie you've been wanting to see." The performance was flawless. Loving wife, happy to be home, eager to spend quality time with her devoted husband. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have fallen for it. Instead, I played along, ordering our usual from Golden Dragon while planning my next move. Over the following week, I threw myself into research with the obsessive focus that had made me successful in my career. I created spreadsheets tracking delivery dates, cross-referenced them with Felicity's travel schedule, and built a comprehensive timeline of the affair. The pattern was more sophisticated than I'd initially realized. Grant wasn't just sending random gifts. He was creating a systematic deception designed to hide his tracks while maintaining plausible deniability. The packages arrived when I was likely to be at work, timed to coincide with Felicity's trips so she could claim they were business-related samples. But the sizing issue still bothered me. Every piece of lingerie, every article of clothing was wrong for Felicity but perfect for Hazel. Either Grant was remarkably bad at judging women's sizes, or there was method to this particular madness. I decided to test a theory. That Saturday, during our usual neighborhood barbecue at the Thorntons' house, I made a point of observing both couples more carefully. Grant and Felicity maintained perfect distance, never standing too close, never making eye contact for too long, professional-level discretion. But Hazel was wearing earrings I recognized from one of the packages, delicate gold hoops with tiny diamonds that caught the afternoon sunlight. When I complimented them, she blushed and touched them self-consciously. "Grant surprised me with them last week," she said. "He said he wanted to do something special just because." "He's got good taste," I replied, watching Grant's face over her shoulder. He was grilling burgers with intense concentration, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "I keep telling him he doesn't need to buy me expensive things, but you know how men are when they get an idea in their heads." Hazel laughed, but there was something forced about it. "Sometimes I think he feels guilty about working so much." Guilty, that was the key word. Grant was buying gifts for his wife with money he was spending on my wife, creating an elaborate shell game of deception that let him play devoted husband while conducting his affair. The elegance of it was almost admirable, almost. That evening, I called my sister Marta in Boston. If I was going to wage war against Grant and Felicity, I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Marta had never liked Felicity, something about her being too polished and trying too hard to be perfect. At the time, I'd chalked it up to sibling rivalry. Now I realized Marta's instincts had been spot on. "I knew it," she said after I'd explained the situation. "I've been waiting 15 years for you to figure out what the rest of us could see from day one." "The rest of us?" "Mom, Dad, Owen, half your college friends. Felicity's always been a social climber, Mercer. She married you because you were stable and reliable, but she was never going to be satisfied with stable and reliable forever." The words stung because they carried the ring of truth. I'd always known Felicity was ambitious, driven, focused on success and status. I'd told myself those were good qualities, signs of a woman who knew what she wanted. I'd never considered that what she wanted might not include me long term. "So what's the plan?" Marta asked. "Please tell me you're not going to just file for divorce and split everything 50-50. After what she's put you through, you deserve better than that." "I'm working on something, but I need time to put all the pieces together." "Whatever you're planning, count me in. Felicity's had this coming for a long time." After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the evidence I'd compiled. Photos, receipts, shipping records, security footage, enough to prove the affair in any court in the country. But legal victory wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something more personal, more satisfying. I wanted Grant and Felicity to experience the same humiliation and betrayal they'd been inflicting on Hazel and me. I wanted their perfect facades to crumble in front of everyone who mattered to them. I wanted justice served with a side of public embarrassment. The idea came to me while I was reviewing the security footage for the third time. Grant's confidence, his casual attitude while selecting intimate gifts for my wife, he thought he was untouchable. He thought he was smarter than everyone around him. Time to prove him wrong. I started making calls, first to Owen, who was delighted to help with what he called Operation Karma. Then to a private investigator Marta recommended, a gruff ex-cop named Evan Prewitt, who specialized in matrimonial cases. Finally, to a few carefully selected neighbors who I knew could be counted on to spread information quickly through our social circle. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of confronting Grant and Felicity privately, I'd create a scenario where they'd have to face their deceptions publicly, in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to them. I'd throw a dinner party. Not just any dinner party, a celebration dinner for Felicity's recent business success. I'd invite both couples, maybe a few other neighbors, create a festive atmosphere where everyone was relaxed and happy. Then, when the moment was right, I'd propose a toast. To anonymity, I'd say. May it never last. And then I'd reveal everything. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. No elaborate schemes, no illegal activities, no violence or threats. Just the truth, served at the perfect moment for maximum impact. I spent the next few days making arrangements, ordered catering from the best restaurant in town, selected wine that would pair perfectly with public humiliation, sent invitations that were casual enough to avoid suspicion, but formal enough to ensure everyone would attend. Grant called to accept his invitation personally. "Sounds great, Mercer. Hazel's been looking forward to a good dinner party. She's been a little down lately. I think getting out will do her good." "I'm sure it will," I replied, thinking about the earrings she'd been wearing. "I'm planning something special for the evening. A real surprise. Can't wait to see what you've got in mind." Neither could I. The night before the party, I arranged all my evidence in a folder marked Anonymous Gifts. Photos of Grant shopping, copies of receipts, shipping records, even printouts of the security footage. Everything organized chronologically, presented with the same attention to detail I'd use for a business presentation. Because that's what this was, really. A presentation about truth and consequences, delivered to an audience that needed to understand exactly what had been happening in their social circle. Felicity spent the day of the party in a flurry of preparation, cleaning the house and fussing over details like the perfect hostess she'd always prided herself on being. She wore a new dress, black, elegant, probably expensive, the kind of outfit you wear when you want to make an impression. She had no idea what kind of impression she was about to make. "Everything looks perfect," she said, surveying our dining room with satisfaction. "This is going to be such a lovely evening." "It's going to be unforgettable," I agreed. The guests began arriving at 7. Grant and Hazel first, followed by the Johnsons from down the street and the Millers from around the corner. Everyone in good spirits, ready to celebrate Felicity's success and enjoy good food with good friends. Grant looked particularly confident, shaking hands and making small talk like the successful businessman he portrayed himself to be. He complimented our home, praised the wine selection, and made a point of telling everyone about his latest real estate victories. Hazel seemed quieter than usual, but she was wearing another piece I recognized, a delicate bracelet that had arrived in one of the packages 3 weeks earlier. When she caught me looking at it, she smiled and held up her wrist. "Another surprise from Grant," she said. "I keep telling him he's spoiling me, but he insists I deserve beautiful things." "You absolutely do," I replied, and meant it. Hazel did deserve beautiful things. She deserved honesty and respect, and a husband who didn't use her as cover for his extramarital activities. She was about to get at least one of those things. Dinner conversation flowed easily. Felicity regaled everyone with stories from her Chicago trip, carefully edited to remove any details that might raise questions. Grant talked about the booming real estate market and his plans for expansion. The Johnsons discussed their upcoming vacation to Italy. Normal suburban dinner party conversation among normal suburban couples living normal suburban lives. Except nothing about this evening was normal, and by the time dessert was served, everyone in the room would know it. I waited until the main course was finished and wine glasses were refilled. The perfect moment when everyone was relaxed and happy, guards down, ready to toast success and friendship. I stood up, glass in hand, and smiled at my guests. "Before we move on to dessert, I'd like to propose a toast," I announced. "To anonymity, may it never last." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. I watched faces around the table, cataloging reactions with the precision of a scientist observing an experiment. Most of my guests looked puzzled but amused. The Johnsons and Millers clearly thought this was some inside joke they weren't privy to yet. But Grant's wineglass froze halfway to his lips. Felicity's smile flickered like a candle in wind, and Hazel tilted her head with the curious expression of someone trying to solve a riddle. "That's an interesting toast, Mercer," Grant said carefully. "What exactly are we celebrating?" I reached under my chair and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Thick manila envelope, labeled in my neat engineer's handwriting. Anonymous Gifts, Evidence File. I set it on the table next to the centerpiece Felicity had spent an hour arranging. "We're celebrating the end of secrets," I said, opening the folder. The end of anonymous packages and mysterious benefactors. The end of people pretending to be someone they're not. The first photograph slid across the polished wood toward Grant. High-definition security camera footage, printed in living color, showing him examining lingerie at Thornfield Boutique with the focused attention of a man who knew exactly what he was shopping for. "What is this?" Hazel asked, leaning forward to get a better look. Her voice carried the first note of concern, like someone who just heard thunder in the distance. "This," I said, producing the next photo, "is your husband selecting intimate apparel for my wife. Size large, which, as we all know, fits you perfectly but would be completely wrong for Felicity." Grant's face had gone the color of old newspaper. "Mercer, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I spread out more photos like a dealer revealing a winning hand. "Here's Grant at the jewelry counter. Here's Grant paying with his credit card. Here's the receipt, showing a purchase made under the name M. Gray and shipped to my address." The silence that followed was profound. Even the grandfather clock in our hallway seemed to pause its ticking. Mrs. Johnson's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down with trembling fingers. Hazel picked up one of the photos, studying it with the intensity of someone trying to read fine print. "Grant, what is this about?" "I can explain," Grant started, but I cut him off. "Please, allow me. It's actually quite ingenious when you think about it." I pulled out a shipping manifest pointing to specific entries. "For the past 6 months, Grant has been conducting an affair with my wife. But instead of buying her gifts directly, he's been purchasing presents meant for you, Hazel, and having them delivered to our house." I turned to address Hazel directly, my voice gentler now, because she was the other innocent victim in this elaborate deception. "Every time Felicity traveled for business, she was actually meeting your husband. Every time a package arrived at our house, it contained gifts he'd selected for you, paid for with money he was spending on his affair, shipped to our address to avoid suspicion, then given to you as surprises when he got home." Hazel's face cycled through confusion, realization, and finally a cold fury that transformed her features into something I'd never seen before. She turned to Grant with the slow, deliberate movement of someone who'd just discovered a snake in her garden. "The earrings," she whispered. "The bracelet, the perfume you gave me last month." "Hazel, sweetheart, let me explain. You bought gifts for her with our money, then gave them to me as tokens of your love." Her voice was getting stronger, carrying across the table like a blade. "You made me an accessory to your affair. You made me complicit in my own humiliation." I turned my attention to Felicity, who'd been sitting frozen throughout this revelation like a deer caught in headlights. "And you. You knew exactly what was happening, didn't you? You knew those gifts were meant for Hazel. You knew Grant was using his wife as cover for your little arrangement." "That's not... I never..." Felicity stammered, but her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Here's what I find most fascinating," I continued, pulling out a calendar marked with dates and annotations. "The timing was perfect, almost mathematical in its precision. Felicity travels, Grant sends gifts, they meet for their romantic rendezvous, Felicity returns home, Grant presents the same gifts to Hazel as proof of his devotion." Mrs. Miller cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should give you folks some privacy?" "No," I said firmly. "Stay, please. Because this affects all of us. We're a community. We trust each other. We invite each other into our homes, share our lives, believe we know the people we call friends." I gestured toward Grant and Felicity. "These two have been lying to all of us for months. Every dinner party, every neighborhood gathering, every casual conversation has been built on deception." Grant finally found his voice, though it came out strained and defensive. You're making this sound much worse than it is. Yes, Felicity and I have been close, but it's not what you think. Really? Then explain the hotel receipts. I produced another set of documents. The Marriott downtown, charged to your business account. Always the same dates as Felicity's supposed business trips. How did you get these? Felicity demanded, some of her composure returning as anger replaced shock. I'm a systems analyst, Felicity. I solve problems by gathering data and identifying patterns. You and Grant created a very clear pattern. Hazel stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. She walked toward our back door, moving with the careful control of someone who was fighting to maintain composure. Grant started to follow her, but she turned and held up a hand that stopped him cold. Don't you dare follow me right now. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow carried more finality than if she'd slammed it. Grant slumped back in his chair, all his usual confidence deflated. This is a disaster. Yes, I agreed. It certainly is. For you. Felicity was rallying, her marketing executive persona kicking in as she tried to manage the crisis. Mercer, we need to discuss this privately. There are things you don't understand, circumstances that... What don't I understand, Felicity? Help me out here. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious to hear how she'd try to spin this. Explain the circumstances that justify 6 months of lying to my face while you conducted an affair with our friend's husband. It's not that simple. Actually, it is exactly that simple. You wanted something I couldn't give you. Grant wanted something Hazel couldn't give him, so you took it from each other while pretending to be devoted spouses. The Johnsons and Millers were sitting in stunned silence, probably wishing they'd stayed home to watch television instead of stumbling into the middle of suburban warfare. But they were witnesses now, and I needed witnesses for what came next. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, gathering my evidence back into the folder. Grant, you're going to go outside and apologize to your wife. You're going to tell her the complete truth about everything, every lie, every deception, every moment of the past 6 months. And if I don't, then I'll tell her myself, along with everyone else in this neighborhood, your business partners, your clients, and anyone else who might be interested in knowing what kind of man they're dealing with. Grant's face flushed red. You can't threaten me in my own... He stopped, realizing he wasn't in his own house. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a choice. Handle this with whatever dignity you have left, or I'll handle it for you in a much more public way. I turned to Felicity, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe the man she'd married, stable, reliable, predictable Mercer, had been a stranger to both of us. As for you, my dear wife, you have until tomorrow morning to decide whether you want to discuss divorce terms privately or in front of a judge who'll be very interested in reviewing all this evidence. You're enjoying this, she said quietly. You're actually enjoying destroying our marriage. Our marriage was destroyed 6 months ago, Felicity. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage. Mrs. Johnson finally broke the silence that had settled over our dining room like fog. We should really be going. Thank you for dinner, Mercer. It was illuminating. The other guests mumbled their agreement and began gathering purses and jackets with the hurried movements of people fleeing a crime scene, which, in a way, they were. Within 5 minutes, Grant and Felicity were alone with me in the ruins of what had been a perfectly orchestrated dinner party. The expensive catering, the carefully selected wine, the elegant table settings, all of it seemed ridiculous now, like stage props after the play had ended. 15 years, Felicity said finally. 15 years of marriage, and you're willing to throw it all away over this. I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. Grant stood up on unsteady legs. I should check on Hazel. Yes, you should. And Grant? He turned back to look at me. Next time you want to send anonymous gifts, try using your own address. After they left, I sat alone in my dining room, surrounded by the detritus of revelation. Dirty plates, empty wine glasses, crumpled napkins, the ordinary aftermath of an extraordinary evening. I poured myself another glass of wine and raised it in a solitary toast. To the truth, I said to the empty room. May it always come with receipts. Outside, I could hear raised voices from the Thorntons' backyard. Grant's pleading tone, Hazel's sharp responses, the sound of 15 years of marriage coming apart at the seams. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers and paperwork and the messy business of dividing up a life. Tonight, there was just the satisfaction of watching carefully laid plans come to fruition. I'd promised myself justice served with public embarrassment. Mission accomplished. The only question now was what came next. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, as if the weather had decided to match the mood of our entire neighborhood. I woke up alone in my bed. Felicity had spent the night in the guest room and lay there listening to the sound of rain against the windows while mentally reviewing the previous evening's events. Had I gone too far? The question nagged at me as I made coffee and checked my phone for messages. 3 missed calls from Marta, 2 from Owen, and a text from Mrs. Johnson that simply read, "Are you okay? Call if you need anything." The support was gratifying, but it didn't answer the fundamental question of whether public humiliation had been the right approach. Then I remembered the look on Hazel's face when she realized what had been done to her, and my doubts evaporated. Some people deserved public humiliation. Felicity appeared in the kitchen around 9, dressed for work despite it being Saturday. Her usual polished appearance was slightly disheveled, hair not quite perfect, makeup applied with less than her usual precision. She looked like someone who'd spent the night staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. "We need to talk," she said, pouring herself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "I'm listening." She sat across from me at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. The morning light wasn't kind to her. I could see lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when we'd gotten married, a tightness around her mouth that spoke of stress and secrets. "What you did last night was cruel," she began. "Whatever problems we have, they should be handled privately, between us. Dragging our friends into it, embarrassing Grant and Hazel like that, it was unnecessary." Was it? Because from where I sit, Grant and Hazel were already involved. They were victims of your little arrangement, whether they knew it or not. That's not fair? Fair? I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've been working 60-hour weeks to pay for our lifestyle while you've been using your business trips to conduct an affair? Is it fair that Hazel's been wearing gifts purchased with money her husband was spending on another woman? Felicity's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The agency is more competitive than ever, and Grant, he understood that in a way you never could. So this is my fault for not understanding your professional pressures? That's not what I'm saying. She rubbed her temples like she was fighting a headache. Things between us haven't been good for a long time, Mercer. We both know that. We've been going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. She wasn't wrong about that, and the admission stung because it carried a grain of truth I'd been avoiding. Our marriage had become routine, comfortable but passionless, more like a business partnership than a romance. But that didn't justify what she'd done. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to find excitement elsewhere. It wasn't supposed to happen. Grant and I were just friends at first, and then you decided to make it physical while using his wife as an unwitting accomplice. We never meant for Hazel to get hurt. But you didn't care enough to stop, did you? You didn't care enough to consider what would happen when the truth came out. Felicity stared into her coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions she didn't want to ask. What happens now? Now we get divorced, cleanly, quickly, with as little additional drama as possible? And the evidence you collected, the photos and receipts and all the rest? Stays private as long as the divorce proceeds smoothly. I'm not interested in dragging this out or making things worse than they already are. Relief flickered across her features. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There are conditions. Her relief vanished. What kind of conditions? You move out by the end of the week. You can take whatever personal belongings you want, but the house stays with me. Same with the joint accounts. I'll transfer your half of our savings, but I keep the house and everything in it. That's reasonable, she said carefully. Also, you stay away from Hazel. Whatever relationship you had with her before this mess, it's over now. She's dealing with enough without having to see you around the neighborhood. Agreed. And one more thing. I leaned forward, making sure she understood how serious I was. If I find out you've been spreading stories about last night, trying to make yourself look like the victim, or me look like the villain, all bets are off. The evidence becomes public, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person they're dealing with. Felicity nodded slowly. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I've had 6 months to think about it. Every time another package arrived, every time you came home from a business trip glowing with satisfaction, every time you lied to my face about where you'd been and what you'd been doing. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and now we all have to live with the consequences. She left for her sister's house that afternoon, taking 2 suitcases and a promise to return for the rest of her belongings later in the week. The house felt different with her gone, not empty exactly, but quieter, like a held breath finally released. I spent the rest of the weekend fielding phone calls. Marta was proud of me for finally standing up to Felicity, though she worried I might have made things harder on myself legally. Owen wanted all the details about the dinner party, which he described as the most epic takedown in suburban history. Even my elderly neighbor, Ms. Dorsey, stopped by with a casserole and some surprisingly astute observations about the whole situation. I always wondered about those packages, she confided while we sat on my front porch. Strange timing, no return addresses, and that Grant Thornton, too smooth by half, if you ask me. Men like that always think they're smarter than everyone else. What about Felicity? I asked, curious about an outside perspective. Ms. Dorsey considered the question while sipping the tea I'd made for her. Pretty girl, ambitious, but cold underneath all that polish. I used to watch her in the garden sometimes. Never got her hands dirty, always worried about her manicure. That tells you something about a person's character. Monday brought a call from Hazel. Her voice sounded hollow, like an echo of itself. I wanted to thank you, she said, for telling me the truth. I know it couldn't have been easy. How are you holding up? I've been better. Grant moved out yesterday. He's staying at some extended stay hotel while we figure out what comes next. She paused, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I keep thinking about all the gifts, all the times he told me I deserved beautiful things. It makes me feel sick. I'm sorry. I know this is hard. The worst part is wondering how long it would have gone on if you hadn't figured it out. Would they have kept lying to us for months, years? I don't know, but it's over now. Is it? Because I feel like I don't know anything anymore. I don't know who my husband really is. I don't know if our entire marriage was a lie. I don't know how to trust my own judgment about anything. Her pain was palpable, and I felt a stab of guilt for the role I'd played in causing it. Yes, she'd needed to know the truth, but that didn't make the truth any less devastating. For what it's worth, I said, you didn't do anything wrong. You were a victim in this just as much as I was. Were you really? A victim, I mean? Her voice carried genuine curiosity. Because the way you handled everything Saturday night, that wasn't the response of someone who'd been blindsided. That was the response of someone who'd been planning. She was right, of course. By the time I'd confronted Grant and Felicity, I'd moved past the victim stage into something more calculating. I guess I don't like being made a fool of, I admitted. No, Hazel said quietly. I don't suppose you do. That evening, I got an unexpected visitor. Grant Thornton stood on my front porch looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like desperation. We need to talk, he said. I don't think we do. Please, 5 minutes. I need to explain something. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He stood in my living room, the same room where he'd eaten dinner and made small talk and pretended to be my friend, and tried to find words for whatever he'd come to say. I know you hate me, he began. I know what I did was wrong, and I know I hurt people who didn't deserve it. But there's something you need to understand about Felicity. I understand plenty about Felicity. No, you don't. She's not who you think she is. Grant ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that would have looked calculated coming from the old Grant, but seemed genuine now. The affair, it wasn't her first. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? There have been others, at least 2 that I know of, maybe more. She's very good at keeping things compartmentalized, very careful about covering her tracks. You're lying. I wish I was. Look, I'm not trying to make excuses for what I did. I'm not trying to shift blame or make myself look better. I just thought you should know what you're really dealing with. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying I believe you, it doesn't change what you did. No, it doesn't, but it might change how you handle things going forward. Grant pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages, screenshots of conversations between him and Felicity, dating back months before their affair had supposedly started. She pursued me, he said. Very subtly at first, but definitely deliberately. She knew I was having problems with Hazel, knew I was vulnerable, and she used that. I read the messages, trying to reconcile their content with the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. The texts were flirtatious, manipulative, carefully designed to draw Grant in while maintaining plausible deniability. Why are you showing me this? Because you deserve to know who you're really divorcing, and because... He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Because I think she's planning to take you for everything you're worth. What do you mean? She's been asking questions about your assets, your business, how much the house is worth. She's been very interested in the details of your financial situation. A chill ran down my spine. How do you know this? Because she asked me to help her figure out how to maximize her divorce settlement. She wanted me to use my real estate connections to get an appraisal on your house, Help her identify assets you might be hiding. The room seemed to tilt sideways. When was this? Last week, before your dinner party, before everything came out. She was already planning for the end of your marriage. I sank into my chair, trying to process this new information. Felicity hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been preparing for divorce while still lying to my face about her business trips. I'm telling you this because I owe you that much, Grant continued, and because I think you should be prepared for what's coming. What's coming? A fight. She's not going to make this easy for you, Mercer. Whatever she agreed to yesterday, whatever promises she made about keeping things civil, don't trust them. After Grant left, I sat in my living room staring at the screenshots he'd forwarded to my phone. The evidence was damning, but it raised as many questions as it answered. How long had Felicity been planning this? How many other secrets was she keeping? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? The next morning brought my answer in the form of a certified letter from Patterson, Webb & Associates, one of the most aggressive divorce law firms in the state. Felicity was contesting our prenuptial agreement, claiming it had been signed under duress. She was seeking half of everything, the house, my business, even my retirement accounts. So much for keeping things civil. I called Marta first, then Owen, then the private investigator I'd used to gather evidence about the affair. If Felicity wanted a fight, she'd get one. But this time, I'd be ready from the beginning. This time, I wouldn't be the victim. The law offices of Patterson, Webb & Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all marble and mahogany designed to intimidate opposing parties and justify their astronomical hourly rates. I'd done my research before walking into enemy territory. Patterson specialized in high-asset divorces where the goal was maximum extraction rather than fair settlement. Felicity had chosen her weapons well. My own attorney, Sarah Mitchell, was cut from different cloth. She worked out of a converted Victorian house near the courthouse, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and had a reputation for meticulous preparation rather than theatrical grandstanding. More importantly, she'd handled dozens of cases involving adultery and hidden assets. Your wife is playing hardball, Sarah said, reviewing the documents Felicity's team had filed. Claiming the prenup is invalid, seeking spousal support, arguing for equal division of all assets including your business. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Can they make any of it stick? Some of it, maybe. The prenup is solid, but they might be able to challenge portions of it. The spousal support claim is weak given her own income and the evidence of adultery. The business assets are more complicated. We were meeting in Sarah's conference room, surrounded by law books and case files that represented other people's shattered marriages. Through the window, I could see normal people going about their normal lives, unaware that their neighbors were waging legal warfare over who got to keep the good china. What about the evidence I collected? It's comprehensive and damaging. Photos, receipts, hotel records, witness testimony. Any judge would consider this clear proof of adultery. In Connecticut, that matters for asset division and spousal support. But your wife's attorneys are going to argue that you conducted illegal surveillance, violated her privacy, possibly even stalked her. They'll try to get the evidence thrown out or at least minimize its impact. I'd expected this. Felicity was nothing if not thorough when it came to protecting her interests. There's something else, I said, pulling out the screenshots Grant had given me. Text messages between Felicity and her lover, showing she was planning the divorce before I confronted them. Sarah studied the messages, her expression growing more interested with each screen. This is gold. It shows premeditation, planning, possibly even conspiracy to defraud you of marital assets. Where did you get these? Grant Thornton gave them to me. He's feeling guilty about his role in the affair. Is he willing to testify? I think so. He's got his own divorce to worry about, and cooperation might help his case with Hazel. Good. We'll need all the ammunition we can get. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into divorce preparation with the same systematic approach I'd used to uncover the affair. Financial records, asset valuations, business documentation, everything organized and analyzed to present the clearest possible picture of our marital situation. The process was revealing in ways I hadn't expected. 15 years of marriage, reduced to spreadsheets and legal briefs. Joint checking accounts that showed Felicity's increasingly expensive tastes. Credit card statements documenting purchases I'd never known about. Investment accounts I'd assumed were growing steadily, but had actually been depleted by her spending. She's been living well above her stated income, Sarah observed during one of our preparation sessions. Designer clothes, expensive spa treatments, luxury vacations she claimed were business trips. Either she's been hiding income, or she's been funding this lifestyle some other way. Other way? Gifts from lovers, perhaps. Or she's been planning this divorce longer than we thought and has been hiding assets in preparation. The possibility that Felicity had been systematically deceiving me about more than just the affair was both infuriating and oddly liberating. If she'd been planning to leave me anyway, then I didn't need to feel guilty about the way I'd exposed her. I hired the private investigator, Evan Prewitt, to dig deeper into Felicity's recent activities. What he found was illuminating. "Your wife's been busy," he reported during a meeting at his cluttered office above a dry cleaner. 3 different bank accounts you didn't know about, all opened within the past year. Cash deposits that don't match her stated income. And she's been meeting with divorce attorneys for months. Not just Patterson's people, but at least 2 other firms. She's been shopping for the most aggressive representation. Looks that way. She's also been having your house appraised, getting valuations on your business, even researching your retirement accounts. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision after you caught her cheating. This was a carefully planned financial strategy. The evidence painted a picture of calculated betrayal that went far beyond a simple affair. Felicity hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been preparing to destroy me financially while maintaining the pretense of a loving marriage. "There's more," Prewitt continued. "The affair with Grant Thornton wasn't her first. I found evidence of at least 2 other relationships over the past 3 years. She's very good at compartmentalizing, very careful about covering her tracks. Can you prove it?" Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even some photos from a private investigator another suspicious spouse hired. Your wife has a pattern of targeting married men in stable financial situations. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. I'd thought I was dealing with a woman who'd made a mistake, who'd gotten caught up in an affair that spiraled out of control. Instead, I was dealing with someone who'd made calculated decisions to betray not just me, but multiple families. "What about Grant? Was he telling the truth about her pursuing him?" "Seems like it. The text messages he showed you are genuine, and they clearly show her initiating contact and escalating the relationship. Grant was a target, not a co-conspirator. That evening, I called Hazel to check on how she was handling her own divorce proceedings. Her voice sounded stronger than it had the week before, less hollow and more determined. "Grant's been cooperative," she said, "almost pathetically eager to give me whatever I want. I think he's genuinely remorseful about what happened. That's something, at least." "How are things going with Felicity?" I told her about the legal maneuvering, the hidden accounts, the evidence of other affairs. Hazel listened in silence, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or surprise. "I feel like such a fool," she said finally. "All those times she and I had coffee together, all those conversations about marriage and trust and commitment. She was lying to my face while sleeping with my husband. We were both being lied to. But you figured it out. You saw through the deception and did something about it. I just accepted everything at face value." "That doesn't make you a fool, Hazel. It makes you trusting. There's a difference." "Is there? Because right now, trusting feels like the same thing as being stupid." I understood the feeling. The discovery of betrayal doesn't just hurt, it makes you question your own judgment, your ability to read people, your basic understanding of reality. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "Start over, I guess. I'm keeping the house, and Grant's being generous with the financial settlement. I'm thinking about going back to school, maybe getting that master's degree I always talked about." "That sounds like a good plan. What about you? Any thoughts about life after Felicity?" It was a question I'd been avoiding, but Hazel deserved an honest answer. "I'm not sure yet. Right now, I'm focused on making sure she doesn't destroy me financially. After that, I guess I'll figure out who I am when I'm not married to her." "Well, for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with more grace than she deserves. Grace might not be the right word for what I'm doing. Maybe not, but justice is." The next day brought a development I hadn't expected. Grant called to tell me that Felicity had approached him about testifying on her behalf in our divorce proceedings. "She wants me to say that you threatened me," he explained, "that you were violent and unstable during the confrontation at your house. And I told her to go to hell. Whatever mistakes I made, I'm not going to compound them by lying under oath. She's getting desperate. She's getting dangerous. Be careful, Mercer. I don't think there's anything she won't do to win this fight." Grant's warning proved prophetic. 2 days later, Sarah called with disturbing news. "Felicity's team is claiming you hacked into her personal accounts to gather evidence," she said. "They're threatening to file criminal charges for computer fraud and invasion of privacy." "That's ridiculous. Everything I collected was legally obtained." "I know that, and you know that, but they're trying to create reasonable doubt about your methods. They want to paint you as an obsessed stalker who violated your wife's rights." Can they make it stick? Probably not, but it complicates things. We'll need to be very careful about how we present your evidence. The legal maneuvering continued for weeks. Motions and counter-motions, depositions and document requests, the slow grinding machinery of divorce court processing the destruction of a 15-year marriage. Felicity's attorneys threw every obstacle they could think of in our path, while Sarah methodically dismantled their arguments with facts and evidence. The turning point came during Felicity's deposition. Under oath, confronted with bank records and surveillance footage and testimony from multiple witnesses, her carefully constructed story began to fall apart. "Mrs. Bannister," Sarah said, sliding a hotel receipt across the table, "can you explain this charge to the Marriott downtown on March 15th? According to your calendar, you were supposed to be in Chicago on business that day." Felicity glanced at her attorney, who nodded slightly. "I may have made an error in my calendar." "An error, I see. And this charge to the same hotel on April 22nd? Another calendar error?" "I don't recall the specific circumstances." "What about this text message to Grant Thornton on March 14th, the day before the first hotel charge? You wrote, 'Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I've been thinking about you all week.' That could mean anything. Could it? Because the next message in the thread says, 'Room 412. I'll leave the door unlocked.'" The deposition continued for 6 hours, with Sarah systematically destroying every lie Felicity had told and every excuse her attorneys had constructed. By the end, even Patterson's people looked defeated. "Your wife is going to settle," Sarah told me afterward. "They know they can't win at trial, and they don't want this evidence presented in open court." "What kind of settlement?" "Much closer to what you originally offered. She keeps her personal assets and gets a modest cash settlement. You keep the house, your business, and your retirement accounts. No spousal support. And if she refuses, then we go to trial, and she gets nothing. The evidence of adultery and financial deception is overwhelming." The final settlement was signed on a gray Tuesday morning in November, almost 6 months after the dinner party that had started everything. Felicity looked older, harder, like someone who'd fought a war and lost. She signed the papers without looking at me, gathered her copies, and walked out of the conference room without a word. I felt no satisfaction in her defeat, no joy in my victory, just a profound sense of exhaustion and the strange emptiness that comes when a long struggle finally ends. "It's over," Sarah said, shaking my hand. "You're officially divorced. Thank you for everything. You did most of the work yourself. I just helped you present it properly." That evening, I sat in my house now, legally and completely, and tried to figure out what came next. The rooms felt different without the possibility of Felicity returning, larger somehow, but also lonelier. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked out to the back deck, looking over the yard I'd spent years maintaining. Tomorrow, I'd start thinking about the future. Tonight, I just wanted to enjoy the silence. My phone buzzed with a text from Hazel. "Heard your divorce was finalized today. Congratulations on your freedom." I typed back, "Thank you. How are you doing?" "Better every day. Starting graduate school in January. Psychology program. Figured I should learn how to spot liars and manipulators. Sounds like a practical skill? Want to get coffee sometime? Compare notes on surviving betrayal?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'd like that." "Good. I'll call you next week." After she signed off, I sat on my deck drinking wine and thinking about second chances, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the possibility that sometimes when everything falls apart, it creates space for something better to grow. The wine was good, the evening was quiet, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new possibilities, new choices about who I wanted to be in this next chapter of my life. Tonight, I was content to sit in the peace I'd fought so hard to win. The coffee shop was busy for a Tuesday morning, filled with the usual mix of remote workers, students, and people like Hazel and me who'd discovered that neutral territory made for easier conversation. We'd been meeting weekly since my divorce was finalized, initially to compare notes on legal proceedings and gradually evolving into something that felt like genuine friendship. "Grant signed the final papers yesterday," Hazel said, stirring cream into her latte. "It's officially over. How does it feel?" "Liberating. Scary. Like I'm 18 again and everything is possible, but also like I have no idea what I'm doing." She looked different than she had 6 months ago. Stronger, more confident, like someone who'd survived a storm and discovered she was tougher than she'd thought. The psychology program was agreeing with her. She'd thrown herself into her studies with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. "Any regrets?" I asked. "About the divorce? None. About the marriage?" She considered the question while watching steam rise from her cup. "I regret not seeing the signs earlier. I regret being so naive about what was happening. But I don't regret the years we had together, especially the good ones. That's a healthy way to look at it. What about you? Any regrets about how you handled things? It was a question I'd been asking myself regularly. The dinner party confrontation, the systematic destruction of Felicity's legal strategy, the way I'd turned discovery of betrayal into a calculated campaign for justice. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far with the public humiliation. But then I remember how you looked when you realized what had been done to you, and I think maybe some people need to be exposed for what they really are. I'm glad you did it the way you did. If you'd handled it privately, I might never have learned the truth. And Grant? Grant's trying to rebuild his life. He's in therapy, working on understanding why he made the choices he made. We're not friends, but we're not enemies either. He's just someone I used to be married to. I nodded, understanding the sentiment. Felicity had become a similar figure in my life, not actively hated anymore, just irrelevant. A chapter that was closed and filed away. Speaking of rebuilding, Hazel said, how's the consulting business going? After the divorce, I'd made the decision to leave my corporate job and start my own technology consulting firm. It was risky, but the settlement had given me enough financial cushion to take the leap, and I'd discovered I enjoyed the independence of working for myself. Better than expected. Turns out there's a lot of demand for someone who can solve complex problems systematically. I imagine your recent experience with problem solving has been good practice? You could say that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the morning crowd cycle through their caffeine rituals. It struck me how normal this felt. Two people who'd survived betrayal, learned from it, and moved forward. Not bitter or broken, just more careful about who they trusted. I have news, Hazel said eventually. I've been seeing someone. Anyone I know? Actually, yes. Owen from the boutique. We met when I went in to return some of the jewelry Grant had given me, the pieces that came from your wife's packages. He was working that day and we started talking. I smiled, genuinely pleased for both of them. Owen deserved someone who appreciated his artistic sensibilities and dry wit, and Hazel deserved someone who would value her kindness and intelligence. That's wonderful. How long has this been going on? A few weeks. We're taking it slow, figuring out what we want. Neither of us is in a hurry to make any big commitments. Smart approach. What about you? Any romantic prospects on the horizon? I'm not ready yet. Still figuring out who I am when I'm not married to someone who was systematically deceiving me. That's probably wise. Though for what it's worth, I think you're a good man who deserves to be happy. Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you. As we prepared to leave, Hazel reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. I'm glad we're friends, Mercer. I'm glad something good came out of all that mess. Me too. Walking back to my car, I reflected on how much had changed since that morning when I'd first opened one of Grant's anonymous packages. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been clarifying. It had forced me to examine my life, my relationships, my own role in the dysfunction that had developed in my marriage. I wasn't the same person I'd been a year ago. I was more careful about trust, more aware of the signs of deception, more willing to stand up for myself when necessary. The experience had been painful, but it had also been educational. My phone buzzed with a text from a potential new client, someone who needed help untangling a complex database issue that had been plaguing their company for months. The kind of systematic problem solving that I'd always been good at, applied to a situation where I could actually help instead of just documenting betrayal. I smiled and typed back that I'd be happy to discuss their needs. Some problems were worth solving, some battles were worth fighting, and sometimes, when you stood up for yourself and demanded the truth, you discovered that you were stronger than you'd ever imagined. The